Hello again, and this session is about marionettes. I don't have a large collection of marionettes, but the reason I'm here with this screen is, again, this piece of board is really useful to kind of cover up some of the mechanics, to hide the puppeteer slightly. You can completely hide the puppeteer if you want when you're making these videos, but for today, again, I'm going to be very present. A lot of the puppetry that I've seen in previous projects that you've done, you can see the puppeteer. I like seeing the puppeteer and the puppetry as well. It doesn't take away from it. It's just another way of doing things. But if you want to, you can completely make the puppeteer disappear by using this method, just by changing the angle of the camera. But I'm using a very wide angle today, partly because I think it's really important to show you how to do these things. Marionettes are string puppets, and I made that one last week specifically to look at that art form, just because I think you can't leave that one out of the set of different types of puppetry that I've showed you. And I know from a conversation last week, one of the artists was saying that they've been using marionette string puppets as well, and it does have some really lovely qualities. So the use of this playboard is really to help give a frame for what's going on. And also what's great about this is it's a fantastic space for drawing set, putting messages on there. It can be completely designed and painted in all kinds of ways, and you can keep changing them. You can keep changing different scenes for different positions, and you can also build a complete theatre. And I can see some of the theatres that have already been built over there, which I'm very pleased and excited about. So anyway, I'll stop talking about puppets and I'll show you this puppet first, and I'll just try and improvise with the puppet some movements, and then I'll talk a little bit about that first. So I'm just going to bring a bit of sound into the equation, and this is a sound that I've just invented, that I created on a bit of software. So this was the puppet from last week. Okay, so I'll just leave this soundtrack playing in the background. It's quite ambient, I guess. So this puppet, one thing about this kind of puppet and the marionettes, especially when I move them anyway, they seem to have a very strong sense of flow, and they kind of have a set of great, sort of a feeling of grace, let's say. They feel like they kind of want to move in this really lovely kind of way, and you can get them to dance. You can get all kinds of really lovely, unusual movements, and there's all kinds of traditions that kind of play with the puppet spinning and doing all sorts of lovely things. And a lot of what's going on here is led purely by movement and not by words, and it kind of draws the audience in, I would say, because you're just watching the movement and thinking, how does that move? Why is it moving like that? And as you can see, this puppet is purely just cloth. It's just a cloth piece with a shoulder piece. I did show you last week the mechanics of it. It has a bit of cardboard in its shoulder blades to make that come together. It has a toilet roll tube neck, and this head is just the corner of a piece of cardboard. So incredibly simple, and the hands again are just constructed from cardboard and attached to the corners to the piece of cloth. And it kind of, in a way, what I'm letting happen here is I'm letting the actual materials do the talking. I'm letting the materials do what they want to do, which is one thing you can do with puppetry. The key thing with the puppet is that it moves and that it has movement. If it doesn't have movement, it kind of feels like it's not really doing anything. Even when I'm holding this quite still, it still has little micro movements, and they mean it feels like it's got a sense of life to it, it's got a sense of purpose. Here I've just folded the piece of cloth in half, and that means it feels like it's sitting, and then I just use a bit of movement to get it to stand up again, and then that creates a sense of movement. And the walk that I'm doing with this puppet is very simple, and it's just a bit of bobbing. I'm watching it on the screen, but when you're actually performing and getting used to doing puppetry, you probably want to watch the puppet. And what's really important, actually you can't see, is the bottom of the puppet is just a piece of cloth, but on the bottom of the screen you can't see that, so you imagine and you fill in the gaps, and you think that there are feet, or you think there's something at the bottom of this puppet. The key thing for something like that is that the puppet is kept constant in that position. If it starts to sink in performance, then it looks like it hasn't got any form, it hasn't got a spine, it hasn't got legs. And I think it's really important, the principles of this, that the connection between the bottom of the puppet, the bottom of the piece of cloth, and the surface that it's walking on are clear and constant. If they're not, it does that kind of thing where it looks like it's walking down a set, it's walking down some steps and then it just folds. But the other thing that you can do is this little thing with a puppet like this, is you can just simply create a little fold in the cloth by moving it in that way, and that creates a sense that it's actually sitting, and it's in a sitting position, and it gives you even more possibilities for movement. But essentially, one thing I would say for all the puppets that you're making and all the puppetry that's being explored is to explore movement first before speaking. Now, if this puppet was to speak, for example, it's sitting down now and it's quite happy speaking, I'm going to bring the hands into play. In fact, that hand's just gone a little bit strange. So, as you can see, all puppets have limitations, so you have to work with those limitations. So I'm going to use this hand here, and that one now. Just come back. It's behaving. For some reason it didn't want to behave. And the puppet is deciding to think about what it's going to say first, so I'll be quiet for a second. Good afternoon, everyone. And actually, I've been thinking a lot about whether I should buy a new dress, because this silver dress is not actually really the kind of dress that I would like to wear anymore. If you have any ideas for dresses, can you please send me some messages? So, as you can see, when I'm just doing that little silly improvisation with the puppet there about its silver costume, what I'm not doing is I'm not forcing it to speak or trying to move it when it speaks, because if I moved it when it was speaking like that, that just looks really weird and like it's kind of just it's ill. So I'm just letting the puppet speak, transferring my voice into there, and small subtle gestures with that are better than kind of like shaking the puppet around and trying to get it to force it to make it look like it's speaking. That kind of movement could be used for something else, like particularly, it might get really animated and really angry and aggressive or something, and that might work. But you have to be careful when a puppet hasn't got a moving mouth like this, that you don't force the puppet to look like it's speaking. That kind of it doesn't look very nice at all, that. So we've got this character. I'm just going to put it here for now, so it's kind of completely folded. And then, as I showed you last week, I've got this other piece that I made, and this was just actually, I found an old piano in the street that was being smashed up and being thrown away, and I asked the owners of the piano that they were throwing away whether I could take the parts. And this is from the parts of that piano. And as you can see, he has quite the hammers are the feet for that puppet, and even just by little subtle movements you can see he kind of like gets a strange little walk going here, and that's just in the air, he's walking in the air. And with these mechanics of the piano, I managed to make this figure. And it's an unusual figure, and I haven't really got a purpose for it yet, and I might well find it because I've got lots of parts like this from this piano. And what I'm thinking is this could become a character. It is a sort of mysterious character, and puppets, particularly marionettes, can become quite mysterious and strange, and they can represent things that we don't understand, which maybe is one of the reasons why it's quite good for thinking about strange things like COVID. But the other thing just to look mechanically about this puppet is the mechanism is a simple piece of wire, strong wire, and the wire goes all the way to the hips of this puppet because they help keep the structure somehow together. There is quite a bit of movement still in this puppet, but the wire kind of puppetry and wire marionettes are called rod marionettes, and they're called rod marionettes because the fixed quality of the wire to the head means this puppet actually is sometimes a bit more different to control than other ones. There are other traditions of this around the world that use this, kind of exploit this idea of a very fixed wire, because it means you can move the puppet in very purposeful ways. So you can use wire as well as string for puppets, particularly the main one here, and then for the hands I'd just use string again because that doesn't need that kind of direct mechanism from above. In Italy they have these fighting puppets, Sicilian marionettes, and they use wire partly because the puppets are made from solid wood and are very big and they weigh a ton, and it means that they have to use wire because it's the strongest thing, and it means these are kind of like powerful and they can have these huge battles between the different puppet forces. So again, similar to the other type of puppetry with lip syncing, marionettes, the key things are about the focus of the puppet, where it's looking, the way it intends to move. Movement is so important, especially for marionettes, even more so I think. And when you're speaking with a puppet, again, is not to overemphasize the movement in a very strange sort of shaky way, is to just let the puppet speak. Let the movement come from the object and things can happen. And one of the nice things about this kind of work is that you can actually, in this kind of format, you can move puppets together, and you can have a puppeteer, especially with marionettes, you can have a puppeteer that has two puppets. And what's nice about this one, for some reason I've never worked these two together, is the sense of scale. So this actual little puppet almost looks like a little, almost like this is a guardian for this strange little figure here. They sort of strangely look like they're almost from the same world now. But you can operate two puppets with marionettes. And in fact, if you get really kind of into it, you can make kind of multiple puppets off one string, which kind of looks like is lots of fun. And these figures can kind of move independently from each other. You can create relationships. They can kind of connect with each other and make friends. Certain things happen in terms of gestures, and you can kind of create ways of bringing relationships between those characters. And again, a lot of this can come from a lot of what you've already been doing. I know you've been improvising and making work. Keep that going and keep creating. And I think the things that surprise you, the happy accidents, are some of the best things with puppetry. So that's Marionettes, and speak to you soon.